Without question, the 918 exemplifies the absurdity expected of a near $1 million hypercar. Its tub and engine cradle are made of carbon fiber, and it of course has adjustable aerodynamics, dampers, comically large carbon ceramic brakes, and no less than 3 powertrains that, combined, produce horsepower and torque figures that need context to be understood. It's an immensely complex car, and the first question we need to answer on this racetrack in Spain is, how does it drive?
And I think the quick answer is, very well. Oh, RPM is a beautiful thing. We are in full race mode with the traction stability control off, and I'm just amazed. The level of grip, the steering response, the power application, the sound is phenomenal. The most crucial thing about this car, I think, is the way it'll hide all of its computers. New technology at least, is best when you don't know it's there, or if you realize it's there to help you. That you can feel comfortable in a car that costs this much and is this fast is quite an accomplishment. I'm not surprised at how fast this car is. That makes sense when you're working with close to 900 horsepower and over 900 pound-feet of torque. But it's the way that it gives you the speed, that it gives you such easy access to the speed that you don't have to worry about or care about how you get it wrong or if you get it wrong. And that's a very important thing when you're pushing a car that costs nearly $1 million. The braking is impressive too, because the braking is accomplishing, stopping the car, but it's also doing a fair amount of regen too. And they try to make a system that would do both, but feel linear and consistent. And it seems like they have. There's times when the braking feel can be a little bit strange, and I can't really decide what that is yet. But overall, it's a really quality setup, especially for a hybrid car. To have a car with this kind of power and these kinds of limits and have it be approachable and friendly is unthinkable. Is this? What world is this where we can have this? You can have everything. You can have a naturally aspirated V8 that spins to 9150 RPM. You can have 900 horsepower, and you can have an electric mode too that drives the car when you don't want to burn gas. I mean, that's absurd. And yet here we are experiencing it.
Simply, my mind was blown. It wasn't just the speed, but the 918's overall friendliness. The power felt so linear, and the traction was immense. The feeling afterwards was that I had just experienced the future. It was surreal. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's slow down and take the 918 piece by piece.
So this is what it's like starting up a 918 and driving it away. We're off on full electric power, and you hear nothing aside from the chattering of some very cold brakes. And it can drive this way for under 20 miles, so long as you left the house with a full battery. But we're going to switch to hybrid now, because those brakes don't sound very good. Let's see if we can fire the engine. That's pretty cool. So now the 918's driving like a hybrid. We have the rear motor and the engine functioning in a very economical manner. What's interesting is when the engine shuts off and turns on, there isn't a lot of change in how the car drives. Sure, it gets a lot quieter, but you don't feel a sudden kick in your back. You don't feel the engine come on and push the car forward. You don't feel any drivetrain shock. It just gets louder and more powerful. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Now, there's a lot of really interesting technology in this car, and that's what a hypercar needs to be. A hypercar needs to be something that pushes the envelope of what an automaker can do. Now, some people have asked what the car would be like if it just had a naturally aspirated engine, if you had 600 or 700 horsepower, rear drive, and so on and so forth. And Porsche made that car. It's called the Carrera GT. And if you want a purist, back to basics driving car, they still make that too. It's called the GT3 or a base Cayman or Boxster. The 918 though is meant to be a showcase of what this company can do, what kind of technology they can throw in and the results they can get out of it. Those results speak for themselves. The fuel economy this is capable of, its Nürburgring lap time, its acceleration. It's a pretty complete package and very cool in its own right. And you can tell the engineers are super proud of it. They point to the monocoque chassis, they point to the wheel hubs and the axles and everything, and they are just in love. It's like they've just been let loose to go wild on this thing, and the result is impressive, really incredible, given the short development time span.
While the proportions may evoke memories of the Carrera GT, the more you look at the 918, the more interesting it becomes. You notice things like how big those side intakes are, or the intricacy in the mesh covering the engine. Now, as good looking as the 918 is, the only way to really appreciate what's happening underneath is to look at it without sheet metal, and that's what we have here, a completely naked 918. And this isn't just any naked one, it's actually the first prototype, the first 918 chassis that was ever assembled. Now, what do we have up front? Well, there's the traction motor right there, makes about 134 horsepower. Just to the front wheels alone. The interesting thing is because there's no mechanical connection in terms of power to the rear axle, it gives Porsche some really interesting control opportunities in terms of power delivery. They can control power left to right by using the brakes, and it gives them some really interesting advantages in terms of oversteer situations and understeer situations. In oversteer, they can sense that through wheel speed sensors and so on, and apply power to the front axle to help pull you out of a corner. And in understeer, they can apply braking pressure to help the car turn when it's not. Now from the back, the first thing you notice is the just completely awesome exhaust system. Now why did they do that? Well, it's because this 4.6 liter V8 is actually a hot V. All the exhaust gases come out of the center of the V and shoot straight up. It really helps with heat evacuation, and it's actually kind of cool sitting in the car looking in the rearview mirror and seeing the heat waves right behind your head. Now, that helps with heat evacuation because the battery is somewhere down here that's sensitive to heat, so you want to keep all the heat away from that, and that's what they've done. Further back, we have a rear steering system similar to what you get in the 911 Turbo and the GT3. And at low speeds, that helps with maneuverability, and at high speeds, it helps with stability. Also, the wheelbase is slightly longer than the concept car that debuted a couple of years ago, and they had to do that for fitment issues. And it actually ultimately helped with stability in driving, so says Porsche. On the rear, we have the 991 rear bumper with all the fire extinguisher and fire suppression systems that you have to have on a prototype car, because that's just cool. There's one thing that we haven't talked about yet, and that's what happens when you press a little red button in the middle of the dial on the bottom right of the steering wheel. It activates hot lap mode, an excellently named feature that devotes all the battery's resources to making you go faster. This is what it's like. What's most impressive about the 918 is how it ties all of its systems together and gives you the confidence you need to reach for its limits. You find you can always brake deeper, harder, and accelerate earlier. The way this car accepts power out of corners is just incredible. The lightweight Weissach Package 918 lapped the ring in under 7 minutes. Our standard car, though heavier, is no less thrilling. Though it's easy to get to speed in the 918, it wants a driving style that takes a little bit to acclimate to. It likes to be driven like a race car, smoothly, accurately. It doesn't want to slide.
This car was built by a team of people who drive cars fast for a living, but who enjoy the experience of doing it. You know, first driving this car was sensory overload. Now I feel at home. And the trouble with driving this is, how do you go back to anything that's not this?
The 918 is easily the most impressive car I've ever driven. And not just for its advanced powertrain, power, or its incredible construction. It's because the 918 doesn't drive like a technical exercise, but like a fully formed, thoroughly developed, and extremely thrilling machine. It's as engaging on a technical and intellectual level as it is from a purely instinctual one, and the state of awe it leaves on you is long-lasting. I still can't shake the sensation of driving it, but I don't really want to.
918, pretty awesome. Are you recording? This is a lot of car. Wow. Wow. You know, if this is the future of hypercars, cool. Future's gonna be good. Future's gonna be a good thing if this is the future of hypercars.
That was insane.
That was awesome. Jesus.